Okay, hello everyone and welcome to our Empressive Farmer webinar series. This is an educational series designed to share with our farmers and our World Tree community best practices for growing Empress splendor trees. My name is Dr. Kathy Key. I'm the President and Chief Operations Officer at World Tree. And I have to tell you, I am extremely excited about the guests that we have on our webinar this afternoon. Before I introduce our guests, I'd like to let you all know we have here to Rita Fromhold, who organised this webinar. And as we go through, if you have questions, pop them in the Q&A, and Rita will be managing all those questions as they come in. So a few years ago, somebody said to me a word I'd never heard before until I was at World Tree, and that was nematode. And I had no idea what a nematode was and why I should be interested in them. But I started to listen out for opportunities to learn about nematodes. And I came across a podcast which was featuring Dr. Billy Crow, who's our guest today. And I was so fascinated, Billy, by everything that you had to share. I came back to the World Tree team and I was like, all our farmers need to know this information. I have here a short version of your official bio. So let me share that with everyone, and then I will be introducing Jesus, who's also with us this afternoon. So Dr. Billy Crow is the landscape nematologist at the University of Florida, specializing in integrated pest management of nematodes that damage grasses and plants. Dr. Crow is affiliated with the Florida Nematode Assay Lab and assists with the diagnosis of nematode problems from thousands of plant samples submitted to the lab annually. The integrated pest management model uses less invasive and multiple tactics in a programmed approach to manage pests with less reliance on harder chemicals. Dr. Crow's primary role is to educate the public on how to best manage nematode problems. He teaches classes on nematode management for golf course superintendents, nurserymen, foliage growers, sod growers, landscape pest control operators, and other groups to thousands of individuals annually throughout the United States and internationally. So you can hear why he was you were a must-have guest for us on our farmer series. I'm also joined here with Jesus Espinoza, who is our new Director of Farms and Forestry globally. And Jesus has decades of experience completing forest productivity and genetics research and operational management in multiple countries around the world. In fact, Jesus, as I was trying to shorten your bio, I realized that you've worked on every single continent: North America, South America, Europe, Africa, Asia, you name it. Jesus has worked on trees on those continents. Jesus has a PhD in forest genetics and nutrition, and is working with our farmers to achieve the best growth rates while safeguarding the environment. So guys, I hope you're as excited as I am about this subject. I mean, I think maybe, excuse me, Billy, but it's like a little bit of a nerdy thing, but I kind of think it's really, really cool to be into nematodes. So how this is going to go is I'm going to hand over to Billy, who has a presentation for every one of us who's been like, I really want to know more about these critters and how they might be affecting my trees. And then after that, we're going to have a little bit of conversation, and Jesus is going to be translating the highlights for our farmers. So we've got some takeaways for our farmers that we can apply to growing our trees. So Billy, over to you.
Okay, And I'm going to share my screen here. All right, how are we looking there? Does it look good? Okay. Okay, so my presentation, I'm going to kind of general talk about what nematodes are, why they're important, and then go into more specifics on how they, the ones that damage plants and how we diagnose them and what goes on in the lab and those types of things. So let me start off talking a little bit about what nematodes are. Like Kathy said, most people aren't very familiar with them, but believe it or not, they are the most abundant animals on the planet. 7 out of every 10 animals on Earth are nematodes, okay? And so you're lucky to get like a little paragraph in a biology book that mentions them. So, nematodes are, they're the phylum Nematoda. They have their own phylum. And these are the unsegmented roundworms, okay? So if you think about like your earthworms and things that are earthworms are segmented worms, okay? So they have those rings and you watch them and you can actually take that earthworm and break it in half and both ends wiggle around. That's because they got segments to go through their body, okay? Nematodes are unsegmented, so their whole body is kind of like a water balloon that's it's all one piece and under pressure. And so if you try to break a nematode, they just explode, they pop. Okay, so they're unsegmented roundworms as opposed to flatworms. And there's all kinds of worms, okay? But these are the unsegmented roundworms. And one thing to remember about nematodes is these are aquatic animals. Now I'm going to talk today about ones that live in soil and plants and things, and even these are aquatic. And so they have to live and move in microscopic films of water that surround soil particles. But be aware that most nematodes actually live in the water itself, okay? So where do these nematodes live? Most of them are found in the oceans, in the sediments of the bottoms, in soil and freshwater environments. And so, like I said, most of these nematodes are living actually in the water, okay? So you can dredge up sediment from the bottoms of the oceans anywhere, be full of nematodes living there. And this is one of the reasons why nematodes are such an abundant form of life. If you think about insects, well, insects are running around on the top of the ground and maybe a short distance under the ground and a little bit down in the water. Now, these nematodes can live miles down in the water, and actually in the ground, they have went down 2 miles deep in these mines, drilling these mine shafts in South Africa, and found nematodes living down there. So they're throughout everywhere. Down the hall from me, we have a nematode ecologist that is working with nematodes in Antarctica. So you can't get away from these things, okay? They're all over the place. Now the little green and yellow parts of the pie are going to be ones that are what we call parasitic nematodes that are going to live inside animals or inside plants and things, okay? Now, there's, again, all kinds of nematodes, and they eat different things, okay? So generally, nematodes are specific in what they eat and how they feed. So by far, the largest group are these that feed on bacteria. And so that's, where probably 90% of the nematodes out there eat bacteria. And so these usually have a fairly quick life cycle. They reproduce really rapidly and are very important in helping decompose organic matter and things by grazing on bacteria, cycling nutrients, releasing nitrogen into the soil and stuff. There's also nematodes that eat on fungi. If the bottom left there, you see this nematode feeding on a fungal hyphae. These are also very abundant in soil. Whereas ones in the water are mostly going to be these bacteria ones. In the soil, you get a lot more diversity. Now, we also have nematodes that cause human and animal diseases. So that gross looking picture, this is a dog's heart full of heartworms, which are a type of nematode. Okay, and so yeah, a lot of tropical diseases in humans can be caused by nematodes. Uh, you know, intestinal roundworms, hookworms, very important in animal production. So if you've ever raised animals, having to give your dogs or horses or cows or pigs worm medicine, usually it's going to be clearing up these different types of nematode infections. So these are, of course, very important. I'm glad I don't work with them. They're kind of nasty, but
Yes, they look
then I mean, it gets really good. But I know this guy that works with these you know, intestinal parasite nematodes, and his people are going through these villages in Africa, going through all the poop in the village, and counting the nematodes in the human feces and things. There's some really gross stuff out there. Okay, that I'm glad I don't work with, but. Then on the bottom there, you see there's also predatory nematodes that actually hunt down and kill other nematodes and other small animals in the soil. Okay, so these again are all that whole soil food web. There's nematodes in there. Now, the ones that I'm going to talk most about the rest of the time here, and the ones that I work with, are these plant parasites that feed on plants. Okay. Now, if you look here, this is a plant root, and you see these nematodes all feeding on this plant root. These nematodes are very important in that they damage roots, and of course, we have to have a healthy root system to grow healthy plants. So nematodes cause billions of dollars in yield losses every year. They're one of the major limiting factors in agriculture production around the world. And this is why people like me work with these, you know, these nematodes. So most of what I'm going to talk about are going to be this category. Now, remember I told you that these nematodes have to live and move in microscopic films of water that surround soil particles. That means that these nematodes have to be very small because they're going to have to swim in little films of water around the soil, which really limits their size. Now, those animal parasites can get really large. There's one that parasitizes sperm whales that gets 30 feet long, but the ones I work with are all microscopic. Okay, so one of the things that we have to do is get these nematodes out of the soil and out of plants and under a microscope so that we can see them and count them and figure out what's going on with them. So again, all these different types of nematodes. You know, we kind of can group them into ones that are we call the good guys, which are the ones feeding on bacteria, fungi, and these predators, and then the ones that are the bad guys that are cause you know, they're animal parasites and plant parasites. So now, from now on, I'm going to talk about plant parasites specifically. Okay, so. In general, there's three ways that nematodes feed on plants. Okay, nematodes can feed as what we call ectoparasites. Ecto means outside, and so this nematode is going to stay outside of the plant, predominantly in the soil. Then we have endoparasites that are going to go inside the plant and either move around and be migratory or stay in one spot and be sedentary. And these have very different lifestyles and cause very different types of damage and different types of symptoms. So this nematode here, sting nematode, is an example of an ectoparasitic nematode. This is one of the major nematodes that I work with a lot. I'm one of the world's experts on this nematode. This nematode is native to Florida, and we have sent it to other places. It's kind of it got moved around some since, but predominantly in the southeastern U.S. and sandy coastal areas. So as an ectoparasite, this nematode is going to spend its whole life out in the soil. And so when we extract nematodes from soil, we get all the different life stages. And so if you look here, you see the smaller ones are juveniles, the big ones are adults. They look pretty much the same. And then at the bottom of the little box there is an egg. The one that is kind of true to size in the bottom, but then I kind of blew it up so you can see the young nematode curl up inside its egg there. And so these nematodes all hatch from eggs, but you'll find if you extract nematodes from soil, you'll get eggs, you'll get juveniles, you'll get adults. And
sorry, how big is that egg? Just so we can get a sense of the.
Well, this whole nematode here is about 3 millimeters. This is one of the biggest plant parasitic nematodes. Okay, it's about 3 millimeters or 1/8 of an inch. And that little egg is about, you know, it's, well, look at that compared to 3 millimeters. Okay, it's, it's a lot smaller.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I'm sure I could look up how big those eggs are, but I don't have it at the tip of my tongue there. So, okay, so these are ectoparasites, and they're attracted to growing root tips. And you see here we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 5 of these nematodes feeding on this root tip. They have at the head of this nematode this spear we call a stylet is inserting into that root, and then it injects enzymes that kind of predispose the cell contents, and the nematode then sucks those juices back out, and which then kills the growing point of the root. We call the root meristem, which is the growing point. And so these ectoparasites often cause these abbreviated, stubby-looking roots like you see here. On the top frame, that's sting nematode damage on cotton. And you see that root system's just been devastated by these nematodes. On the bottom left is the same type of damage on St. Augustine grass. And on the right is on strawberry. These nematodes can attack a lot of different types of trees and things as well, especially when they're small, when they're young, and cause stunning. Now, endoparasites do not spend their whole life in the soil. At some stage in their life, they're going to go inside this plant. So now, nematodes are clear, and so we've actually stained these nematodes. As you can see them inside this root. They're not red naturally. They've been stained. But you see these nematodes have all, again, they're attracted to this growing root tip, and then they enter in and go inside the plant. Now, if they are migratory endoparasites, like these nematodes here, they tunnel around through that plant, feeding as they move from cell to cell and burrow through there. And they can tunnel in and tunnel out of the root and tunnel around inside like that, moving. And then they can lay their eggs in the soil as well as inside the plant. Now, as they're tunneling through there, this is what they're doing to your root system, okay? You see the healthy root system on the left. These nematodes have all burrowed through. You see it disrupts the root tissue and causes havoc in there, which then causes the roots not function properly. These nematodes, typically these migratory endoparasites, often cause what we call lesions. If you look at these roots on this amaryllis here, you see these dark lesions on the roots. And then as it gets severe, that root will just kind of rot and break off, okay? At the top for right frame, you'll see on peanuts, again, these lesions caused by lesion nematode. And if you see the peanut that he's holding here, that peg is just what connects the peanut to the plant, and that's rotted off. And then what happens when you go harvest those peanuts, the nuts get left in the ground, okay? So you lose your yield just by not having it be able to turn up, okay? So again, these nematodes can cause a lot of damage. This is on St. Augustine grass, and these nematodes will tunnel through there. On the left, you see the healthy roots are nice and white with lots of fine fibrous roots, whereas the ones on the right, there's really no fibrous root system there. So this plant, again, can't take up water and nutrients and function like we want it to. Okay, so now on those migratory endoparasites, you can get some in the soil, some in the roots, because they're kind of tunneling in and out of the root all the time. Sedentary endoparasites are nematodes that are going to go inside the root and then establish a permanent feeding site and then never move anymore. So on the top left, you'll see this root. You see those, again, these are actually root knot nematodes I'm showing you. And these are the second stage juveniles, which is the infective stage. They've went into that root, they go into the root cortex, they produce particular hormones that cause this feeding site to develop. From that point on, this nematode doesn't move anymore. It stays in one spot and actually can't move. And you see as on the right, these nematodes are molting, they're getting larger. And in the bottom, here you have an adult female, and you see she's starting to lay eggs. You can see she's kind of lost her worm shape now. She's got what we call piriform, or kind of a pear shape there, okay? So there's a number of different types of sedentary endoparasites. Most are effective at the second stage juvenile, some are different stages, but this is the most common one that you're going to run across for these root knot nematodes. Okay, so now typically these nematodes will lay, these sedentary endoparasites are going to lay eggs in an egg mass, which can either be at the root surface, like in the big picture here, we're showing these egg masses. The females are in the roots and she's sticking her butt out of the root and laying her eggs there. On some plants, though, they'll actually retain the roots inside. If you look on the bottom left, that root split open, you see that nice pearly female nematode. And that behind it, now we've stained these red so you can see them. They're not normally red like this, but these are, there's like little jelly beans in there. It's packed full of these eggs, which in this case are actually stay inside of the root system.
They all look, Billy, they all look pretty scary. They remind me of like some of the science fiction movies I've seen.
Yeah, this is true. So, but this is what hatches out of the egg. It's the second stage juvenile, and this now then finds another root and goes inside. Okay, so when you do extract nematodes from soil, on these nematodes, this is the only stage you're going to find in the soil, are these second stage juveniles. The other stages are all inside the plant. Okay, so which kind of changes the way you diagnose these things, because these are ones you really, ideally, if you got a live plant, you need to get plant tissue to get the nematodes out and not soil. Those root knot nematodes cause these galls, knots, or these big lumps on the roots. Now, these are pretty easy to diagnose. Okay, so even if you don't know much about nematodes and you can see these knots on there, you can be pretty sure you got a nematode problem. Okay, and so now I will say that not every root knot nematode and plant combination do you have these nice big galls you're going to see. But if you do see these galls, that's a good indication you've got root knot nematodes. Usually when people think about nematodes, this is what they're thinking about, because this is a really easy thing to see. Most nematode symptoms are much more difficult to diagnose and can look like other things. This is on some liriope plants. Again, you'll see, you don't see those great big galls like on the previous picture, which was actually passion vine. But here you have these swollen and cracking that's going on in these roots. This is a woody landscape plant. Again, you see these galls on here. So these are indicative of root knot nematodes. But again, most of these nematodes, actually, other than root knot nematodes, this is the only one that causes this type of easy to diagnose symptom. So as Kathy mentioned in my introduction, I am in charge of the University of Florida Nematode Assay Lab, where we do a lot of handling samples that come through. I want to talk a little bit about why sample and then how to sample for nematodes if you think you have a problem. Okay, so there's three main reasons to sample for nematodes. One is diagnosis of a plant problem, where you've got a problem going on, you want to know why. The second is selection of a management strategy. So if you want to know if you got a potential nematode problem so that you can avoid it or treat it. And finally, for phytosanitary reasons, if you've got shipments moving around, so you don't move around invasive pest nematodes, okay? So these are all symptoms of nematode problems. If you look on the top left, this athletic field infested with sting nematode. And one thing to notice is nematodes tend to aggregate. They're not evenly distributed in soil. They tend to clump. And so you'll see the damage occurs in patches like this. Okay, so you have patches of declining grass. It's wilting because it doesn't have a root system. And then you got this invasion of weeds because because the grass is weak, it gives the weeds a competitive advantage. Okay, on the top right, that is a giant bamboo farm where they're growing bamboo for bamboo shoots. And you'll see areas here where the plants are very small, stunted, and not growing because of nematode problems, and areas where the plants are growing normally. So again, you see that uneven distribution in areas of stunted plants.
Hey,
On the
Billy,
bottom, yes.
how we can differentiate, these kind of symptoms on the leaf versus nutrient symptoms that, can maybe
Well,
very similar?
you can't. Sometimes nematode damage looks identical to different nutrient symptoms because they're damaging the roots. And so you may have nutrients there, but the plant can't take up those nutrients. And so a lot of times you're seeing nutrient deficiency symptoms or symptoms of wilting. There may be moisture present in the soil, but the roots are damaged, so the plant can't take it up. So wilting and nutrient symptoms can be caused by actual lack of water or lack of nutrients, or in this case, nematode damage, which is, again, that's again why we have to sample to find out what's going on, okay? On the bottom left, this is a peanut field. And now if you look on the left, you see the plants look a lot healthier than the ones on the right. That's because they planted a resistant cultivar. And so, but you see on the ones on the right, even here you see that the damage is kind of patchy. You got this yellowing going on. Again, you're seeing this nutrient deficiencies, declining of the plants because their roots are compromised. So, but on the left, you see nice healthy plants because you planted a resistant plant cultivar over there. Then on the bottom right, this is actual foliar nematodes. This is a species that I was just involved in describing, this new species. Actually, paper hasn't come out yet, but it's will be shortly. But this is Aphelincoides pseudobessi, which is this foliar nematode that causes these angular leaf spots. It actually goes inside the leaves and tunnel around inside the leaves of the plant and causes angular leaf spots. So there are nematodes that cause stem and bulb and seed type symptoms, as well as these root problems. So, another reason besides just figuring out finding out what's causing damage to live plants, often we want to sample so that we can determine what to do and or how to avoid the problem. Okay, so I showed you this peanut cultivars. In this case, the peanut grower might send a sample to us and we say, oh yeah, you've got potential problem with root knot nematodes, so you need to use this resistant cultivar. Okay, now if you got sting nematodes, we don't have resistance to that. And so you can't use resistant cultivar for sting nematodes. Then you would have to go to an actual nematicide. So that helps you kind of determine what management strategy to go for. The choice of the crop. It's interesting, the root knot nematode species that feeds on peanuts won't feed on cotton, and the one that feeds on cotton won't feed on peanuts. And so sometimes the grower will send, if you think about should I grow cotton or peanuts, we can tell you what species you have, and then you might help you make a decision on where to go with that or how to rotate your crops. Selection of cover crops. Different cover crops are resistant to different species of nematodes. So if we know what nematode problem you're dealing with, we can help you select a cover crop that won't help make that problem worse. And then in some cases suppress your nematode problem. And then we also, from selection of a nematicide, because again, different nematicides work better on some nematodes than others. And so by knowing which nematode you're dealing with, we can help you pick the best product to use for that nematode. And finally, for phytosanitary reasons, again, nematodes have gotten moved all over the world on contaminated plants and soil. And so, we often will sample. Here in Florida, we have our Florida Division of Plant Industries. We have a nematology group over there, and this is all they do is they inspect plants that are coming in and out of the state of Florida for regulated nematodes. APHIS does this on the federal level. California has a very strong nematode phytosanitary program as well. So again, we want to avoid spreading our nematodes to new areas. Okay, so this is our extraction lab. You see Laban there. He's our main nematode extractor guy. And on the bottom left is Alex, who actually counts most of the samples for me. Alex has a PhD in nematology, he's a trained nematode taxonomist. And these are two of my key people, but we have a number of people that work in our lab. But again, we have to get nematodes from bags of soil and from plant tissue into little vials of water that Alex can put under the microscope to see these nematodes. So there's a lot that goes on there. I'm not going to go through all the extraction processes, but there's several different ones we use for different types of nematodes, for getting nematodes from soil or from plants. Okay, so in sampling, if you are sampling before you plant anything, it's just bare ground. In those cases, you're just going to be sending soil to the lab, and we extract the nematodes from the soil. Okay. Now, if you have actively growing plants, it's important to send both soil and plant roots in most cases, because again, we've got the ectoparasites in the soil, and then we also have some that are going to be inside the plants that you're not going to find out in the soil very much. And so we have different processes for extracting from the soil and ones from the roots. So again, if you got live plants, we encourage you to send both soil and roots in your sample. It's important to take multiple samples and combine them. Don't just get from one spot, because remember I showed you nematodes are very unevenly distributed, they clump. If you just take from one spot, I could tell you, you may be 10 times more or less nematodes in that spot than you will just a few feet away. And so you need to kind of take multiple ones. Generally want at least 12 from spots per acre to kind of get a good accurate representation if you don't have any plants growing. Okay. And so this is just a diagram. If you got a field, you would just kind of go back and forth along here to collect all your cores, put them together in a bag and send them in. Now, if you've got symptomatic plants, like on the strawberry field here with sting nematodes, you see the areas where all the stunning's going on where these nematodes are. Okay, so you wouldn't want to sample in a zigzag pattern. All you would sample symptomatic plants. And so now you wouldn't get the dead plants, because again, these nematodes have to feed on live plant tissue. So once the plant's dead, there's going to be fewer nematodes there. But you would pull these plants that are sick but not dead, like these ones along here, these stunted ones over here. This is where you get your samples from. Okay, so in this case, targeting symptomatic plants. Now, if you're sending roots, you want to get roots that are attached to the plants you're worried about. Okay, if you see here, we've got this, my student here is sampling these pittosporum plants here, but you see all these weeds growing around. Okay, and so some nematodes may be feeding on these weeds that aren't feeding on the plant we're concerned about. So she's actually following, making sure she's getting the root from the plant that's attached to the plant that we're concerned about in this case. Okay. So you collect soil from around the roots of the symptomatic plants and include roots that make sure they're attached to the right plant. And if you got small plants, go ahead and send the whole plant, the root ball and everything in. Okay. Here's something you don't want to do. Okay, on the left, you see that big, thick, woody root. We don't want that, okay, because even if there's nematodes in there, we're not going to be able to get them out of that root. Okay, so we want ones that are like on the right, which are the finer diameter fibrous root system. Those are the roots we want to get our nematodes from. Okay, so you get a sample, get those fibrous roots, not the big, thick, woody ones. This is a potato field here in Florida. If you look on the bottom, they're getting ready to harvest these potatoes. They go in through it with an herbicide and spray them to kill the top part. Then they come through and harvest the potatoes. So this is at the end of the potato season. Here in the middle, yeah, you see this is now let a lot of weeds and stuff grow in between crops. And then on the top is right before they get ready to plant potatoes. So they work this field a number of times. They'll form it up one last time and then plant their potatoes in there. Okay, so if you were sampling this field, when would be the best time to sample? Okay, often we get samples like on the top right before they plant. But actually, the best time to take your nematode sample is at the end of the previous crop. Okay. This is when the nematodes that feed on those plants you're concerned about are most abundant. Okay, they're the highest numbers. We're going to get our best recovery and kind of really good idea what's going on. And it gives you plenty of time to plan how you're going to manage these things on your next crop you're going to plant. okay? Now, the next best would be when you get all of the weeds and stuff up here, because again, some of these nematodes will be feeding on the weeds. It's there's activity going on, and more of the nematodes will be up top. Actually, the worst time to sample is right before you plant, after you've worked this field, because at this point, again, these nematodes, they don't like being up where you're tilling it and you're being exposed to sun, so they're going to go down deep. You're going to hang down below where you're sampling, okay? So and I have seen this a lot of times where you'll find no problem nematodes up here, and you plant your plant, and then these nematodes can move several feet up, and to go up as soon as you plant, oh, there's something to eat, I'm going to head up there and then attack it. So
just stating the obvious, probably these are soil samples. We're not taking any roots at this point, like we did.
Correct. Yeah, this is predictive sample, not as opposed to diagnostic sample. Okay, so couple things with nematode samples. We recommend you put samples in plastic bags, okay? Now remember, these are aquatic animals, and so if the sample dries out, you get dead, shriveled up nematodes, you're not gonna get good recovery. So we want plastic so that it holds the residual moisture in, the sample doesn't dry out before we get a chance to get it, okay? Now, if you think about, you always tell you don't leave your dog in the car in the summertime with the windows rolled up. The same thing if you're in a sealed plastic bag and left on the dashboard of your car or the back of your pickup truck, you're going to get steam nematodes. Okay, so once you get these samples in the plastic bag, you want to get them out in a cool spot as soon as possible. You don't have to keep them in a refrigerator or anything, but keep in a cool, air-conditioned place, and they're going to be shipped off as soon as possible, because the longer they sit around, the more the nematodes tend to die. Typically, whichever lab you're sending these to, they're going to have forms. Put as much information on that form as possible. One of the common mistakes we have is people just don't fill out these forms. We get a form that says landscaping. I have no idea what that means. Are you worried about the grass? You're worried about the trees? I don't know. So tell me what plants you're worried about, as much information as possible, okay? These are just some of the samples that came through our lab recently. You see here a lot, these here are good ones. You see here they got them in plastic bags, sealed up. They've labeled them properly. You see here they've got plants in there and soil. Those are good samples. The ones on the right, you see are bad samples. These are in paper bags that are going to dry out. Not very good. Okay, so one is in plastic, not paper. I love this. We got a bunch of these coming in from Alabama, which are in Auburn University soil testing laboratory boxes that say, do not use this box for nematode soil samples. We got 40 of these all at once. Okay. This is what happens if you put nematode samples in paper bags. Okay, they had 4 different samples in here, and these bags just fall apart, and we don't know what's from what. Okay, so again, seal these things up. This is my team. This is, I got, like I said, this is the whole group here. If you're interested, I am on social media. You can follow me on Twitter. We have on Facebook, we have our University of Florida Landscape Nematology Nematode Assay Lab Facebook page. And what's probably most important is our lab web page, which is if you go to, if you want to submit samples to our lab and those types of things. Okay. My phone number, email is probably the best way to get hold of me. Sometimes difficult to catch by phone, but with that, I conclude my presentation.
Wow, that was fantastic. I love how happy your team look as well. Everyone looks like they really love what they do. It's awesome.
Yeah, we do have a lot of fun. It's a fun group. Yeah.
That's great. Well, first of all, I learned a ton, and it's having a visual of how to do the sampling and the best way to do the sampling and what to send. That on its own is gold for us and our farmers. Mm-hmm. Really, I have some questions, but let's see if we've got any questions coming in from the channels here.
Yeah, Hugo has a question. How do you differentiate it from a fungi attack?
Okay, so some of the symptoms can look very similar. Okay, especially when you got just like rotting roots. Okay, that could be caused by nematodes. It could be caused by fungi, and so really you have to send it to a lab get the diagnosis in those cases.
Right,
So
right.
yeah, so and in the lab now we're extracting nematodes from the soil. In a plant disease clinic, they're going to be culturing fungi out of the tissue and stuff. So
All right,
yeah.
right. It's tricky.
Yeah, this is difficult. Just like other than root knot nematodes with the galls, other than that, it's very difficult just to base upon. I mean, you got these symptoms, which tells you I need to send a sample in and find out what's going on, because I mean, even I can't look at these things to tell what they are most of the time.
Tricky, like a virus.
Yeah.
They're everywhere. Some are good or some are bad. So Roy is wondering then, to remind us again, what is their purpose in nature? Because you've talked mostly about how destructive they are, but
Right.
what do they do?
So, like I said, about 80% of the organic matter gets broken down. At some point, it goes through a nematode. Okay, so without nematodes, we'd be piled up under organic matter. So all this decomposition that goes on, what happens is you got most of the breaking down organic matter going from your tissue to humus is done by bacteria. Okay. And what nematodes do is they graze on that and getting the bacteria, and which then opens up new areas for bacteria to explore. And nematode poop is a much higher concentration of available nitrogen than bacterial exudates. Okay, so basically you're getting organic nitrogen gets mineralized through bacteria, through nematodes, then becomes available to plants. And so that's one very important function, is mineralization as nitrogen, as well as aiding with decomposition of organic matter. Then you have, again, your food for all these other animals in the soil. Nematodes get eaten by, fed on by different bacteria, fungi. They get eaten by columbella and mites and tardigrades and other nematodes. And so they're very important as a food source for other animals, as well as the predators that then eat the other animals. So that whole soil food web, and is very important. There's nematodes that, I showed you the bad ones that are parasites on animals, but there's actually ones that parasitize insects that are used as biological controls for certain insects. And so some that occur naturally, there's some that have been commercialized for controlling slugs and snails and root weevils and different types of plant pests as well. So you'll see lots of advertisements for nematodes in garden stores and things for biological control of different insects.
Fascinating.
Do you want to ask a question, Kathy?
Yeah, I'll ask a question and I'll hand it over to Jesus. Yeah. So I can see, that if you've got some trees or a patch of trees and they seem to be stunted, or there's an issue, there's a good chance there's a nematode problem, or you should go and get your nematode situation checked out. But the philosophy is prevention is better than cures. So what about, prior to planting, should you always test your soil for nematodes, or do you only do it if you're suspicious of a nematode issue? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think if you're planting into virgin land or land that's been in pastures, you're probably okay. Okay, because specifically with Paulownia, we have found the primary nematode problem on Paulownia is various root knot nematodes. I mentioned ones that attack peanuts and ones that attack cotton. Both of those attack Paulownia, okay? As well as we've got 5 different species of root knot nematodes here in Florida that attack Paulownia trees, okay? So But none of those are ones that get on these pasture grasses and are really forest problems. So if you got new land, you're probably okay. But if you're going into former agricultural land, I'd say it's probably a good idea to get it tested, because if any of the nematodes that have been on the cotton or the peanuts or the soybeans or whatever was grown there previously, it's a good chance they may also attack the Paulownia trees. So now, one good thing, I was really impressed with you guys growing your plants from tissue culture and things. You know, a lot of plants that are grown, you know, from not propagated that way, you know, you get a lot of you know, plants that are come with their crop of nematodes straight from the nursery. And so you know, with good sanitation, that shouldn't be a problem. But you know, that is one thing that's you know, a source is if you know, actual planting material can come.
Right, yeah, so you want to
sanitation.
make sure that both the soil you're planting into and anything you're bringing in is clean before you
Right.
start.
For,
Yeah.
like on golf courses, I mean, I do a lot of work with nematodes on golf courses, and most of that grass comes with a whole crop of nematodes along with the sod where they're planting. And so and other plants as well. I mean, you know, there's we've now got this invasive root knot nematode species, Melodica interlobi, which in the United States only occurred in Florida up until just the past couple of years, and now it's popped up in Louisiana, North and South Carolina, and on sweet potatoes primarily, because again, that's a tuber. So as you move your tubers around, you're carrying the nematodes along with it. So yeah, but yeah, good sanitation in the nursery. And if you're planting into former agricultural land, I'd say you probably want to get a nematode test done just to kind of see what's there and kind of plan accordingly.
Very helpful. Jesus.
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. Yeah, I have questions. The first one is, how long the nematode live?
Okay, there's different species, some that live very short lifespans, like a week, some that can live as long as 8 months to a year. Now, there are nematodes that have very specific survival stages that can last for decades. Cyst nematodes, which is nothing you have to worry about on Paulownia trees, but in Kathy, in your neck of the woods where you come from, over in Europe, these potato cyst nematodes are a huge problem, and those it's kind of neat. The female nematode, instead of laying her eggs out in the soil, she keeps them inside her body, and then she dies, and her body hardens and makes this impermeable cyst that protects those eggs. And those eggs won't hatch until you plant another potato plant. So they can stay there 6-7 years, just waiting for you to plant. And they can sense when you plant a potato plant, then the eggs will hatch and attack the potato plant.
I'm telling you, this is science fiction. It's like going to a planet that's been uninhabited for a million years.
Well, you know, it's interesting. It's interesting. Now, I'm you know, but of course, potatoes originate in South America, right? And so, of course, in the Andes Mountains, primarily is where these is the origin of potatoes, and that's also where these nematodes come from. It makes sense, right? Because it's you know, and so you know, the Inca Indians, which knew nothing about nematodes, they knew you couldn't plant potatoes 7 years until 7 years after you planted potatoes previously. So they actually had a rotation. They did the 7-year rotation where they would move. So if you grew potatoes, you couldn't plant in there again for 7 more years. And that's how they managed this nematode, just by, I guess, generations of trial and error without knowing anything about nematodes, but they knew that rotation, which is the life cycle of those nematodes.
Another question is, you know, is any or the nematode are specific for crops, they are very specific, or nematode can attack any kind of the trees in crop. And the reason is, I'm asking it just because we know there are, as you mentioned, there are some nematodes that attack Paulownia or affect Paulownia, but we have several species of Paulownia. So they are specific. There are some species that are resistant to nematodes.
Yes, and so there's some nematodes are more host specific, like those potato cyst nematodes I was telling you about. They're only a problem in potatoes, okay? But there's some nematodes that are very generalists in their feeding habits. So and even in groups like the root knot nematodes, there's one that only attacks pecan trees, okay? And there's some that attack all kinds of trees. And now we haven't, I'm not aware of any, this whole nematodes on Paulownia is kind of a new area, right? So we've found 5 different species here in Florida on Paulownia of root knot nematodes, and so it seems to be susceptible to a whole bunch. But I don't know if different species of Paulownia are going to be more susceptible than others to certain ones. So that's definitely an area that we need at some point look at it in some research. And because it'd be nice if you knew, okay, I can plant this species and get away from my nematode problem. But at this point, I don't think we're there yet. It's been kind of more just descriptive work and not really digging in, on a crop like cotton. We know all about nematodes on cotton, right? But Paulownia is something pretty new.
The other question is, once we detect this nematode attack or affecting on a given crop, what we can do, we should eliminate that part of the crops. We can just try to reduce the impact of the nematode attack to the trees, or what will be the procedure? I mean, and not be really scared,
Yeah, well, there's things you can do before planting, okay, as far as, some fallowing, or using a cover crop for a year before you plant, things like that. But once these things get in the ground, okay, again, there's no nematicides that are going to be labeled for this type of purpose. Okay, it's not like, again, like peanuts, where there's some highly effective chemicals you can use. Okay, there's things I'm sure you could use on Paulownia on these or forest trees, but there's really no nematicides labeled for that use. So chemical treatments are out. There are things you can do to improve your soil conditions. I think with one of the big things is going to be cover crop selection, because again, you're not going to be keeping clean fallow in these, and so what you have growing in amongst these trees is going to be important. So you don't want to have plants that are also host the same nematodes, where you just make the problem worse and worse, right? So you want to use, and that's where I think knowing what species of nematodes we have, we can help you then pick out plants to intercrop amongst that would help not make it worse, and maybe even suppress the nematodes. We've been doing some work with certain compost materials that can be suppressive to some of the plant parasitic nematodes. Again, it all becomes economics. Is that practical to do to add these types of things? But there are some things you can do if you can spend the money doing those types of things.
Really great. So we're coming to the end of our time. Jesus, if our farmers were to remember just one thing from our time with Billy, what would you want them to remember?
I think the important here is that, it's a million nematode, but only 10%, feeding by the tree, by plants. So that's really good to know. But also it's important to keep monitoring our crops. And if we see something, abnormal on the leaves, maybe it's nutrient or whatever it is, but we need to report. We need to, figure out what it is and take sample and send to the lab. We are here to help you, to deal with that and get some advices and find the tools needed to resolve the problems. And the other take-home message is that, as you see, the nematode move on the water. So that's why it's extremely important to have soil well drainage. If not, we need to build drainage. I mean, just to be a little bit more safe than this with this issue. Also, it's important, it's difficult to differentiate the nematode, but together we can work on this and figure out what is the best option to control them.
Yeah, very
I'm trying to answer some of these question and answer things as we're talking.
Oh, we've got some more Q&A
Yeah.
in here. All right, yeah. What have we got?
Someone was asking about the nematodes that affect pine trees, and the ones that affect pine trees are going to be different species than these ones that affect the Paulownias. And so that's sting nematodes are more of a problem on pine trees, whereas on Paulownia it's more root knot nematodes. Let's see.
What's Wayne's one? He says, I have a diagnosis from you for root nematodes from my farm. My take from what I gathered is possibly planting new trees in a compost enhanced hole and hope for the best, as I'm only dealing with a small percentage of trees with issues.
Yeah, so basically, nematodes are going to be the biggest problem when the trees are young. Okay, so they're going to cause stunting. It's going to take longer for your plant to grow to maturity. So yeah, I wouldn't say straight compost, but mixing this in the planting hole can definitely help the plant get a head start on those nematodes and get a jump on them. Okay, so it's not going to make the nematodes go away, but it kind of gives your plant a head start. And so that would be how I'd recommend doing that. Now, if you're going to now the other problem that's going to be a problem is when I used this term with Kathy the other day about retooning, and you called it a different word in your crop. What did you call it? Where you cut it, it grows back?
Coppicing.
Coppicing. Yeah. So in that process too, now you're whacking the tree back, and now it really needs to draw from its roots to come up. It's probably going to slow that process, but at that point, there's a lot less you can do about it. So it's more that first time you plant is when that type of approach would be best to use. Okay. Labs that accept samples. Our lab can take samples from any state in the US except for Washington, Oregon, Nevada, Colorado, and Idaho. And that is because they have a species of nematode that our state doesn't want, and we don't have here. And so now but we can take from any of the other 45 states. So, but you can, there should be some place in your state where often they'll have a state diagnostic lab that can help you. But
and we'll be posting an article summarizing this webinar plus the webinar online. So when we do that, we will post the link for your lab so that people have a really reliable source to go to.
Okay, somebody's asking about planting mustard to keep them away from hemp. It's not going to keep them away, but what that is more of a cover crop effect, like I was talking about. These mustards, the nematodes that attack hemp are generally not going to attack the mustards, and the mustards will help keep the weeds down too. So, but it's not going to keep the nematodes away. It's not a repellent type thing. Okay, but using non-host cover crops can help. Okay, and let's see, trees can be attacked at any age. Yes, but the problems are worse when the plants are small or when they're compassing.
Okay, yes,
Yeah.
or repeat.
That was something too, Kathy. Okay, I think that's all the questions there. I just kind of.
Really great. I love how excited everyone got in there and asking their questions. Well, this was really, really valuable. I am never going to forget to put a soil sample in a plastic bag after seeing the photographs today.
You know, that is one thing for 20 plus years, I keep telling people that, and we still get about half of our samples come in paper bags. And but I guess earlier on it was more like 80%. So I guess I am making some headway there. But
We're improving. Thank you so much. We will be posting all of this information online, and I'm sure we're going to be referring our farmers to this for years to come. So thank you, Billy. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
thank you guys. I had fun.
You too.